So I think I should start because in any case, you'll have time for your presentation after my short intro. So without any further ado, let me first of all thank you for joining us. Thank everybody for joining us for this second Creative PEC webinar of the academic year. In academia, we always like to refer to academic years rather than calendar years. So this is the second. Really, it's not the second webinar of the series as far as we are concerned. Now, for all those of you who are not yet familiar with the Creative PEC, we were born in 2018 out of the Industrial Strategy and founded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council to provide a step change in the quality of evidence for the creative industries. And now, thanks to 5 more year funding from 2023 to 2028 by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, we will keep growing the evidence base and address industry and government's priorities for the creative industries while advancing research into the longer term challenges and opportunities facing the sector. As I said previously, since 2023, the center is hosted by Newcastle University in partnership with the Royal Society of Arts. Now, the series is developed to showcase cutting-edge research and foster dialogue across academia, policy, and creative practice. And each session, like today, delves into fresh research, followed by an interactive Q&A session. People can sign up to the next seminar in December on the events page of the Creative PEC website. Following the last seminar by Simona Iammarino, today's speaker is Professor Karol Borowiecki. Welcome, Karol. Karol holds a PhD in economics from Trinity College Dublin and a PhD in economic history from Lund University in Sweden. He has a very strong publication record in leading economic journals, including the so-called top 5, as well as in interdisciplinary outlets. And furthermore, he has recently published a textbook on the economics of arts and culture with Cambridge University Press, and has co-edited a book on cultural heritage with Springer, which became a main reference for scholars, practitioners, and policymakers. Now, before giving the floor to Karol, a quick reminder to all those online that the seminar is being recorded. Following his talk, we will have a Q&A session. For the Q&A session, please use the Q&A function to pose your question, and I will do whatever I can to make sure that these questions reach Karol. While we will not be addressing every single question during the hour that we have, we will try to do whatever we can to return to you with answers where questions have not been answered. Thank you for your cooperation. Now, let me now give the floor to Karol, who will speak about competing for equality, gender bias on juries in international piano competitions, 1890 to 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giorgio, and good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for this generous introduction, and it's really a pleasure to be joining this fantastic series here, and this time as a speaker. We indeed will look here and we'll talk about gender bias, about gender gaps. So topics that are very timely. What is perhaps less timely is the composition of the authors here. So we are all male, but still we do hope to present things as scientifically as possible. Roberto Asmat and Mark Law are the 2 co-authors. Now, many institutions, and this is stepping perhaps even away for a minute from the creative industries, just to get a bigger picture. Many institutions worldwide advocate for greater female representation on recruiting committees, on evaluation panels, and so on. And the idea is simply to enhance gender equality, hoping that female evaluators will support and promote women. And now the question is whether women actually benefit from being assessed by other women. And there are two possible answers. One is that, well, if men are in some way biased against their female colleagues, and since men are overrepresented, then female evaluators may be beneficial. The other possibility is that if female evaluators view other women as threats, as potential rivals, well, then the greater presence of female evaluators may actually harm women. So at the end of the day, it's really an empirical question, and the evidence provided so far is somewhat mixed. So some find that having more female evaluators will benefit women, others find no such effects. And these studies are usually conducted, say, during certain limited periods of time or in particular countries. So perhaps the question is, does this ambiguity stem from simply the previous context? And then the follow-up question is, why does something like this happen? Why does one or the other thing happen? So what are the mechanisms? Why do female evaluators benefit other women, or why they do not benefit? These are the questions that I will try to address here now with you. And this will be done in the context of international piano competitions. And through a rather long time of focus on a rather long time window, a bit more than 1 century. And competitions that will include, such as this one here. So we see here the Chopin piano competition, the competitor sitting here at the grand piano on the stage. The jury is behind him evaluating his performance. Now, this is a bit an unusual stage. This is a final stage, the last round of this competition, where the pianist is accompanied by other musicians, some audience here and more audience in the concert hall. So why is this international piano competition context useful? Where, first of all, we were able to obtain data on a very long time period, namely over 130 years. As you will see later, most of the observations are actually from the 50s, 60s, but still these about 70 years is quite a long time period. We were able to obtain data on about 100 different countries, a lot of nationalities where both men and women are involved as competitors and or jurors. Now, this setting is also very interesting because assessment is inherently subjective, right? It's not a math competition where the answer is either right or wrong. It's a performance, and whether somebody is better or worse is very subjective. And we are very excited by this setting because labor markets are not very different. Also here, if you think about a job market, candidates, a man, a woman, or a candidate in general evaluated, who is better. Choosing the better candidate is a very subjective choice. Third, in piano competitions, there exists a significant and very persistent gender gap, and I will show you this in a few minutes. And then finally, it's a very important context for musicians, as winning a competition can be very conducive, towards one's career. What we do here, what I will show you, I will talk about the gap. I will show you the gap, and then I will show you the different approaches that all deliver a very consistent result on the effect, on the consequences of having more female evaluators on female pianists. I will introduce these 3 different approaches a bit later, but just to tell you already now, this is something that will be done at the competition level. in parts at the competitor level, so at the individual level. This is a very strong approach, as we will be able to control for unobservable individual characteristics such as skill, quality of the individual. And then something very novel, which I believe was not done before, a mixed gender paired competitor approach. So where we will compare two competitors who have competed at more than one competition, and holding all these unobservable characteristics constant. And all these approaches here will point towards the following result. Female juries can be or are harmful for women's success on average. In particular, replacing an all-male jury with an all-female jury would reduce the likelihood of a female pianist reaching the final round by more than 20%, reaching the podium, so being ranked first, second, or third by more than 30%, or winning by more than 40%. So very sizable effects. And then we will also try and look at the mechanisms. So why are women tough on other women and or generous with men? And we will observe, among others, that prime age female jurors who are former winners of less prestigious competitions are particularly critical, are particularly biased against women, which makes us suggest that they perhaps perceive other women as a threat. So emerging female talent possesses or creates this threat. They are rivals in a labor market that is very much segmented, and where competition in these little relatively small segments is very significant. In terms of literature, there was quite a bit of written on whether women help or harm when evaluated by other women. I have shown this on the previous slide. There exist gender gaps in classical music. This is another fact, but also studied in different contexts. And then finally, at the very end, I will try to squeeze into this half an hour some insights on whether the dropout rate, the attrition, is different between men and women. And in fact, I will show you here also that women are more likely to drop out from the competition circuit, which again connects here with a literature on the differential persistence in a profession, in an occupation by gender. Very briefly, 2 or 3 insights here on the setting. So competition, a classic piano competition is open to any applicants. Typically, they are relatively young, in their early 20s, very often conservatory students or recent graduates. There takes place some pre-selection. The attendance is usually self-financed. These are small amounts usually that competitors have to pay. Then once accepted at a competition, there are a couple of rounds, typically between 2 and 4. In the last round, competitors are ranked and given or awarded prizes. And winning a competition means usually a rather small prize money, but perhaps more relevant, it may also lead to different career opportunities, such as agency representation, concert bookings, recording opportunities, and similar. The jurors who are evaluating at these competitions are selected by the organizers. They are usually reasonably very diverse. So there are some concert pianists, some piano teachers or music teachers, or musicians, typically, rather influential, prominent. And there are quite some few jurors, typically between 5 and 13. There are international, and there is some variation in how they arrive at the verdict. Now, in our estimation, we will be able to control for some of these factors with competition fixed effect. So we will be capturing some of these unobservable here factors. Moving over to data, we were lucky to obtain or to purchase rather data from the Alling-Argerich Foundation. This foundation is run by a person who is very passionate about piano competitions and has been diligently collecting records for thousands of competitions held since 1890, and this data includes information about the competition. So where and when does it take place? How many rounds did it have? Who won? Who were the top 3, or in some cases more, top 10 finalists. And then, very important, it provides also the names and nationalities of all pianists and all jurors. So essentially, with this data, in a way, we can track the early career of musicians across the different competitions. And what we use are competitions with at least 2 editions. And in doing this, we arrive at a bit more than 4,500 competition editions, which represent more than 600 unique competitions. We have more than 40,000 unique competitors and more than 8,000 unique jurors. So, well, it's not big data in a statistical sense, but I think it's still big data when it comes to music. This data comes actually, we believe, very close to the population of important piano competitions. In this particular project, very important is the gender coding. So gender was not collected, was not provided. We had to assess it based on the name and the nationalities provided. So we use the World Bank database, which has a very rich, many million large list of unique names. And then in an automated way, we are assigning gender by looking at the name and nationality. In most cases, we were quite certain about the gender. In some cases, we were not. And then we have been manually determining, and in many situations, double checking the gender using Facebook, Namepedia, musicians' websites, and similar. So we succeeded essentially in a bit more than 98% of assigning gender with certainty, or with very high certainty. So this is a nice large enough data set in our opinion. The first graph here shows a little bit how many female participants there have been over the decades. Now, as you will see, there are not so many competitions before 1950. From the 1950s, we have much more data, much more is happening here. The fraction of female participants is relatively high. So female participants, these are those who have been accepted at a competition. And this is, so women accounted for even a little bit higher on average than 50%, I think 51, 52%. There seems to be a decrease in the last 20, 30 years, though. The right panel shows you the fraction of female jurors. So this here has been increasing over the first decades, and then in the last maybe 30 or so years, it stayed fairly stable at about 32%. Now, this presentation will not be very technical, but let me just here at the very beginning tell you, based on this one example, that we are estimating throughout the paper very simple linear regressions that include different fixed effects, and which allow us then to study the relationship between some variables of interest. And here, what I will show you here first is a simple confirmation that this gap that we have graphically seen is robust. So we see that female have in general it more difficult to reach finals, and they are less likely to be winning a competition. This is all in percentage points. And this holds this is very stable, controlling for different observable characteristics such as past success, experience. So it could be the case that women are on average less experienced than men, but even controlling for these characteristics, their chances of succeeding are much lower. Over time, the probability of reaching the finals has increased in the last 60 or so years, but it stayed fairly stable. So this is an increase relative to the early 20th century. When it comes to winning, nothing really has changed. The chances of a female competitor winning is as high, or rather as low nowadays as it was 50 or 100 years ago. So it seems that the progress has been relatively slow. Now, translating these percentage points into a percent, so female pianists are about 27% less likely to reach the final round and more than 40% less likely to win. So this magnitude, the magnitude of this gap is very significant, not only statistically but also in economic terms. Now, the main analysis here, the role of female jury on female success. And as previously said, I will be presenting this here in three separate approaches. So first of all, we just exploit the within competition variation in fraction of female jurors. So within one competition, such as the Chopin competition, we will hold constant different fixed effects here, including competition fixed effects. So the only thing that is varying here is the share of female jurors. And this coefficient beta 1 is of interest. Why this dependent variable is a measure of the gender gap, and we have 4 different ways to measure this. We could look first of all at the gender success gap. So it's essentially the difference between the average female success and average male success, and by success here we define how many stages, how many rounds within a competition have you progressed, and again this is the difference. So it's really the relative success gap or the relative success of women in comparison to male. And then we have 3 likelihoods, the finalist likelihood gap, so the fraction of females reaching the final round minus the fraction of males reaching the final round. We have the podium likelihood gap, so this is being ranked top 3 women relative to men, or the female win likelihood, so what's the probability of a woman winning the competition. And we see that in all these for all these measures, we arrive at negative coefficients here. So the greater the female share in jury, and the the worse women perform in terms of stage progression relative to men, the less likely they are to reach the final round, to reach the podium, or to win. The first three coefficients are very significant. Now, the second approach that we pursue is a competitor level analysis. Now, this is needed because one potential problem with the previous approach is related to unobserved differences in quality of competitors. And this may be correlated with the fraction of female jurors. So, for example, if women know that if female competitors know that there are many female jurors on the evaluation panel, they may perhaps self-select into a given competition. Maybe this attracts worse women. It's another possibility, or lower quality female competitors. In order to investigate whether this is the case, we narrow down the data to competitors who have participated at least at two or more competitions. So essentially, we can track the same individual over two or more competitions. We can then hold the individual fixed effects, and then essentially exploit the exposure to the female jury share. And this is what we do here. And of interest is this interaction here. So if the competitor is female, a greater share or greater female share in jury is always negatively correlated with our female success measures. So this means here, as already said in the introduction, replacing an all-male jury with an all-female jury would reduce a female pianist's success ratio by 0.031 percentage points, which corresponds with 10%. So 10% lower progression, 22% lower chance of reaching the final, 30% lower chance of reaching the podiums of top three, and a very significant 40% lower likelihood of being a winner. And then finally, the last approach here is a paired competitor analysis. And this we believe was not done before because it's very difficult to come by the right data. Now, here we are comparing pairs of competitors who have competed at two or more competitions. And this is very important because at the end of the day, it's not only the individual quality that matters, but the relative quality of the individual relative to other competitors, right? It's a zero-sum game at the end of the day. If I win, Georgia cannot win, and vice versa. So what really matters is the relative advantage, the relative quality of an individual. And this is what we can do here. What we can also do is conduct a very interesting falsification test, so we can see whether there is any impact on female jury share on the same gender pairs, so comparing male and male or female and female. And this is summarized here on this table. In this table, so the female share in jury is negatively and very significantly related with the female performance relative to male. So women are harmed by a bigger female share in juries. And then the falsification test. So if you compare instead pairs of male competitors or pairs of female competitors, there is no effect. The coefficient is very small and insignificant. Okay. Now, let me say a few words on the mechanism. essentially, the question is, why do female competitors perform worse, do not do as well, when they are evaluated by juries with a higher share of female? Now, what we do here is we try to we use a very rare data set that provides us information on the scoring of individual jurors of competitors. In this competition here, in this particular competition, the competitors are scored on a 24-point scale, and we are able to see how each of the jurors has been scoring each of the competitors. And most relevant here is this result here. So female, if there is a female juror who is evaluating a female competitor, the score is systematically lower. It's significantly lower, which once again makes the point that it is a female juror who is harming or biased against the female competitor, and not, for example, the male juror who favors a male competitor. Now, I also would like to show you here some exploration of which women or what type of female jurors are biased against female competitors. And since we have some information about past performance of jury members, we can, for example, look at whether they have won some competitions before, whether they have not been this is the winner, whether they have not won but taken part, or if they have not taken ever part in previous competitions, and the same for male jurors. And what we see is that especially those who have won previously are the toughest. So especially those female jurors who have won a previous competition are the toughest on other women. If we add here one more dimension, if we add the age component here, so if we see, if we disentangle here or disaggregate the winners into young, prime age, and older age jurors, we see that the prime age past winners are the toughest on the female competitors. What we also see is that these female jurors who are the toughest, they have won non-WFIMC competitions. WFIMC, this is the World Federation of International Music Competitions. It's a bit like the FIFA in the piano world, which in the classical music world, which collects leading competitions, and those that are not affiliated are the lower quality ones. So perhaps we could carefully here conclude that and speculate that indeed the female competitors who have won worse competitions, who are at the prime age, are the most significantly leading to the gap that we observe. I'm not sure if I have 2 more minutes, Georgia. If yes, I would say here one more thing about the dropout.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Now, let me tell you here also something about the dropout. So competitors drop out at different stages. from the competition circuit. And this is potentially harmful for the individual because with more experience taking part in a larger number of competitions, the probability of reaching the final or of winning is increasing. This makes sense, right? The more you take part in something in a given competition, the better you get, and the more likely you are to perform well. But the problem is that female competitors, are much more likely, significantly more likely, to drop out from the competition circuit than men. And this is leading to the issue that, you know, if they drop out early, then this experience is not accumulated. They have worse chances later of well, they have perhaps a worse career prospects in the music industry. Good. I will conclude, but happy to discuss any of this more in the Q&A section. So we do believe that we provide some evidence which appears to be very robust, and suggests that a greater female share on the juries harms female competitors in international piano competitions. This is based on many countries, on data covering jurors and pianists from many nationalities. Not much has changed in this over the last decades. We observe also that prime age female jurors who were once winners of less prestigious competitions are the toughest, and that women are more likely to drop out. So let me, you know, finish up here with an attempt at drawing some policy implications. So if the goal is to decrease the bias against female competitors, maybe the focus of the organizers should be on the jurors' histories as former competitors. So select those who are less likely to view the competitors, the emerging female talent, as rivals. Second, in order to decrease the dropout rate, decrease attrition, try provide additional support to women, to female competitors, whether in the form of mentorship, networking, feedback sessions, or a bit more intrusive maybe, but perhaps still useful instructions to judges, limit communication, decrease the opportunity to influence one another. Among the youngest, perhaps, women-only competitions or separate categories for junior male and female participants is one possibility. I mean, it has to be evaluated whether this is the right way forward, but this would deal perhaps with some of the problems highlighted here, or blind auditions. And let me just finish here by referring to the Leeds International Piano Competition, which with which we have been in contact a year or 2 years ago, and the chair of this, Fiona Sinclair, a very supportive, progressive cultural manager, she has implemented some of the recommendations listed just before, and informed us that at the last competition, actually, the participation rate of female was at 30-35%, and about the same share reached the finals. So all I'm saying is there is the chance to improve, there is the chance to change and to decrease the gender gap. Now, choosing and implementing the right policies is not easy, it's costly, but there is the opportunity. Thank you very much, and looking forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karol. I can see already a few questions. As you can imagine, many of these are clarifications some of the results you presented or some of the analysis. And given that we normally don't, it's really difficult to handle questions during a talk. We normally leave questions for the end, so we may need to go back to some of the slides that you presented. But in general, let me say that while you were presenting, so many of the questions that I had were in my mind already answered in the next slides, which is usually a sign of a really well thought and well conducted research. And it's great to see how, especially in this last slide, the implications of your research, which is clearly very well conducted in line with academic standards, is able to also influence on the ground the way people operate. And I'm sure that some of these results will be very interesting for some of our stakeholders. Now, I have questions, given that my role is to give a voice to people who currently don't have a voice. I have a question by Alejandro, which is a clarification. The slide shows the distribution of female participation over time. There is a decrease in the variance of the distributions over time as well. Why does this happen, if you have an explanation? And then I have a couple of questions by Hassan. One is, are the jurors' votes made public in any of the competitions? And if so, is this in the data? And the second question is, can you say a little more about the higher rate of female dropout and at what age it occurs? And I'll leave there are now 3 questions that I'll leave for later.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for the questions, Alejandro and Hassan. The first one, indeed, it's well observed, the variation decreases. I think this has mostly to do with the fact that we have increasingly more competitions over time. Now, this is here showing the number of competition editions over the different years. Which then leads to more precision in the estimation of the averages. The other question by Hassan. So are jurors' votes made public? Usually they are not. They are not in our main data sets. So in this data covering these hundreds of competitions and thousands of pianists. However, we were able to obtain from one particular high-level competition the voting records in the first round. So this was publicly provided. So from here we knew who were the jurors, who were the participants, and what score has each participant received by each of the jurors. And this was here something that I have very briefly presented, showing that based on this here data, it's a much smaller data set, only 546 observations, but still it is showing us how female jurors are giving lower scores to female competitors. The last question here was about the higher rate, the higher dropout rate of women, and at what age does it occur? This is a good question. Now, I suppose one of the thoughts is kind of, well, it would be on the labor markets, family considerations, having children, and so on. This doesn't seem to be here. So the competitors are, we don't know the age of the competitors. So this is just to say the first thing, but they are typically beginning, or they are typically in their 20s. So many begin in their teenage years, and then throughout their 20s, they take part in different competitions. Somewhere or at some stage, we have estimated how many competitions. So we know the date of the competition, so we can look at, how clustered are the competitions time-wise, and they are, well, relatively clustered temporarily. So we do believe these ages are relatively young, but we don't have the data on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Karol. I have a few more questions. One that appears as anonymous in my Q&A. You mentioned that there is pre-selection of competitors. Assuming there is no data on these, how might biases in pre-selection affect the interpretation of the findings? So that's one question. I would add to this that if you have any information on what is the actual population of and distribution of genders over time, because clearly saying that you might have 30% of female pianists in a competition, but what is that relative to the actual population? I think it's my question added to what somebody has asked. And then Nirat is asking whether this result, I think it's really more in terms of intuition in from the literature or in European, why women might be tougher on women than otherwise. And Ikra is asking or is making a suggestion. One suggestion in UA is blind auditions. Is there similar analysis to this work carried out on blind audition processes, or is this not enough of widespread practice to allow such analysis?
A number of excellent questions here. Maybe I will begin with the easiest here, the last one by Ikra. There is one paper that I'm aware of. It's by Goldin and Rose, orchestrating in parity, I think is the title, where they explore rare data at one competition during a relatively short period of time, I believe, where blind auditions take place. There is some research on this. We didn't have the knowledge of which competitions are blind. Some may have been at the pre-selection stage, but to the best of our knowledge, once somebody is accepted to a competition, so once they become a competitor and are included in the data set, and then blind selections do not, or blind auditions do not take place anymore. Now, the first question here, Giorgio, that you asked about pre-selection. The participants, they are usually submitting their recordings, and jury is listening to these recordings. Now, is this blind or not? They do not see the face, but possibly in some cases the name is provided so they can guess what is a gender, what is a nationality, and so on. And then a subset of these submitted recordings is allowed to participate in the different rounds. Perhaps on this topic here, one thing that I have not mentioned, and I think it's quite relevant as well, it's a selection into competitions. So one concern could be the following. If it is common knowledge that there are more women sitting on a jury at a given competition, a certain type of participants could be attracted. Maybe more women, maybe worse women or worse participants. But what we see here is that there is no relationship between female share in jury and a number of average characteristics of female competitors or of the gender gap in average characteristics. So we do not see here any sign of positive or negative selection into competitions. The next question: what is the actual population of gender? I understand of pianists, of musicians in general, right? So not of the competitors, but the population of musicians in general. Now, this is an interesting question. We don't have data on this. how would you obtain it? Perhaps, look at conservatories, right? How many female, male conservatory students are enrolled? Because what happens, during and after conservatories, some enter the competitions and pursue, if successful, are more likely to pursue a career as a performer, as a recording artist, and so on. And others who do not enter the competition circuit, maybe because they are not good enough or because they don't want it, they move in other directions, perhaps into pedagogy. They become music teachers and so on, right? So I think we have here different, like subpopulations, which makes it quite difficult to assess, what is really the population of musicians that you are interested in. But just to maybe mention here a classical music throughout history, if we look at music composers in a just published paper here by me and Tuco and Christensen and Law, we do observe how terribly underrepresented, extremely underrepresented, are female composers in the history of classical music among composers. And we try to also analyze this in different ways. And then the last question here, this was by Nirat, I believe, about why is there some intuition explanation. So we have some speculation here, and this is here at the end on a couple of slides. Just to maybe without going through all these thoughts here. We observe, first of all, that the markets for musicians are highly segmented. You become a performer or a teacher in a simplified way. If you become a performer, also here the segmentation by instrument is large. By prestige, how high do you go is also large. So essentially, if there is a female juror on the committee assessing a female competitor who is a potential competitor, or well, a potential rival, so somebody who could work in my area as well, could also be a pianist, a performer, and this is rather likely because we talk about piano competitions. Those
conflict of interest, essentially.
Yes, those who are previous jury members, they have likely won some competitions before, so they are more likely to be performers. So we conclude that likely it is indeed this perception of threat. If you also look at prime age past winners, so not the young ones who are perhaps still using the latest methods and techniques. It's not the older participants who maybe are close to leaving the career, ending the career, but the prime who see the biggest threat in new talented competitors.
I can see a few more questions and we are running out of time. So let me see if I can condense some of these questions. So I think Rodrigo first is really going in the direction of a possible interpretation and asking whether this could be due to structural sexism in society, for example. And then Sarah is actually, I think, asking a question that has been partly answered by you, but if I interpret correctly, she's asking from a slightly different angle, which is the angle of nationality, same nationality. We know that is quite controversial in other kind of competitions, say gymnastics, for example. But again, I think Sarah's coming from the same angle because clearly we performing the same circuits, similar audiences, so there may be more bias of the kind of you're talking about. And the question that she has also whether the jury is known to competitors before they submit application. I think that was partly answered by your slides, but it's clarification. Now, Ian and Alton are asking, I think, what are the last two questions very quickly. First one by Ian is on perceived beauty attractiveness at play. Men judges may be willing to suspend their bias against attractive women players to a greater extent than women judges, for example. And Asan is also asking a follow-up question to the earlier one. Is it possible to estimate the marginal impact of making juror votes public, assuming in the data when a competition went from being close to public? And he's asking because he thinks most policymakers would presume that moves towards greater voting transparency would be a powerful way to reduce biases.
So another great round of questions. Thanks so much. And I'm a bit under pressure here, under time pressure. It looks as this could take a longer time. But I will try to kind of be brief here. The first question by Rodrigo regarding sexism. So is it something that is directed at one gender? Now this is not. This is kind of filtered out. This is controlled for in the paired competitor analysis, right? These competitors are not changing their gender across competitions. Gender stays, constant. We compare male and female competitors. The only thing that changes here is female share in the jury, right? Everything else is controlled for with a number of fixed effects. So only the female share in jury is changing. If you have more female participants, female competitors, sorry, if you have more female jurors, the female competitors are disadvantaged. Great question about nationality by Sarah. So again, nationality does not change. So this is controlled here, or should be controlled with the pair fixed effects, but it's also controlled clearly in the individual estimations, the competitor level regression results. So this is a bigger table. I just showed you here one of the panels, but all these include individual fixed effects. So nationality, a constant, is being controlled for. However, I think it's a great question, something that would require a different project to look at nationality biases and so on. So this is something that we were thinking about and are open to eventual co-authorships. There was something about that sometimes is known. Sometimes it's known. What was this? Whether the composition of the jury is known. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So there are so many competitions, each does a little bit different things. Now, what we have everywhere, we have the competition series fixed effect. So we do control here for these unobservable differences by means of these fixed effects.
The question on beauty and whether
Yes,
beauty can
the
play a role.
beauty is a great point. Now, beauty shouldn't matter, but it could. Beauty is one thing, but it's also seeing how one performs, the body language, the movement, and so on during the performance. So this is something that could be could be a factor here. So this would explain in a way why women are biased against other women, younger women. The competitors are usually younger than the jurors. So this could be perhaps one of the explanations, right? Now we don't have data on this, but we observe, for example, that especially prime age female jurors are the most negative, the most biased, not young ones, perhaps because young ones perceive themselves as relatively beautiful enough. So perhaps this could be put here forward as well as a hypothesis open for further analysis. And then a question, was it Hassan?
Yeah.
Um,
On the marginal impact on making juror votes public, because that he thinks
yes,
could be
yes.
quite powerful and perceived by a good policy strategy.
Yes. On making things public. So indeed, transparency usually leads to more efficient outcomes. It prevents various unfair or unjustified behavior. So I think indeed this is a nice suggestion here, something that we should perhaps add to our list of recommendations. Now, having said this, in the in using this data from this one particular competition where the voting is public, where it is known, even here female jurors are evaluating female competitors negatively, right? So the question is perhaps whether this public knowledge here or this public voting outcomes have decreased
Bias.
or not, right? It may be the case that without being it public, that this would be an even bigger number, right? But this is only speculation. We don't know, but as economists, I think advocating in favor of transparency is usually a safe policy. Thank you for this.
Perfect. Thank you very much. There are a couple of further questions, but we unfortunately the time has run out. We'll pass them to you later. So thank you very much, Karol, for such a fascinating presentation, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it, and it's definitely brought our understanding of the topic. We know how equality, diversity, and inclusion is such an important topic in our world and in the creative industries. Therefore, your results and your policy insights from your results are very welcome. I would like, before closing, to thank everybody who's been involved in the preparation of this webinar, from our funders to the team at Newcastle University and the Creative PEC, and in particular, Elisa and Tom. I'm looking forward to the next seminar where we will welcome Trilce Navarrete from Erasmus University Rotterdam, who will give a talk on digital culture, emerging trends in museums online, and notate the event in your calendars for the 5th of December. So thank you all for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you at our next seminar. Thank you again, Karol. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
And also, thank you for the many good comments and suggestions. This is always very appreciated by researchers. Thank you.
Thank you. Just follows from a fascinating presentation. Thank you.